Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Steel News podcast. I'm Brendan McGrevy here with the Steel News, alongside Jay with Steelers Loyalty and Braeden with Bengals _NFL. Guys, the Steelers, they made the playoffs all right, but it was a rough start. Jay, take us through the beginning of that Steelers playoff game they had against the Bills.
Yeah, what I saw was too many mistakes early, just small details, whether it's fumbles, turnovers. Mason Rudolph had a big interception at the goal line inside the 5 yard line. So it sucks because his stats overall as a starter were good. He had 5 touchdowns to 1 interception, but it was like the interception came at the worst possible time in the playoffs at the goal line. And then the Pickens fumble, the Bills capitalized off that right away, 7 points. So that's basically a 14-point swing altogether just because of the turnovers. So I mean, it's hard to win when you're big underdogs on the road and you're basically spotting them that many points. You can't do that.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. And Braeden, what did you see from, the Steelers run game? Because it was almost non-existent this game. The Bills were just able to shut down Najee Harris and Jalen Warren.
Yeah, I think just to kind of capitalize what Jay was saying is when you have that many turnovers and you put yourself behind, it's kind of difficult to run because obviously, even for the Steelers, while that is strength of their offense, that does kill a lot of time. So now you're required to pass more. Obviously, as we saw, there was less running attempts, more dropbacks for Mason Rudolph. So I think just those turnovers early, the Bills getting ahead, getting that big lead early took the Steelers off their game plan. And that's something, especially early in the playoffs, you don't want to do, especially against the Bills, who we know the Bills have been wildly inconsistent this year. Unfortunately for the Steelers, their really good selves, the version of themselves that could win a Super Bowl, came out. So I think just between the turnovers and the best version of the Bills coming out, really nothing you guys could do on that end. It's hard to prepare for a team that they don't even know that's coming out. I think just between those two factors, that really dug the Steelers into the hole and made it difficult for them to come back and win the game.
Yeah, and going off what you guys were saying, the offense, when you're down by 3 scores, it's really hard to establish a running game because you kind of feel a sense of urgency. And the Steelers' defense even kind of didn't look like themselves without T.J. Watt. This team is now 1-11 without T.J. Watt since he's been drafted. Kind of shows why he's one of the best defensive players in football, but we missed him out there. Josh Allen had that big, I think it was a 52 or 51-yard rushing touchdown, which was like the second longest, I think, by a quarterback in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, playoff history. And it was tough. The Steelers, they're not able to cover tight ends on defense. Like Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox just ended up having some big-time plays. I know Knox only had one catch for a touchdown, but it kind of feels like the Steelers really struggle on defense with stopping the run and covering tight ends because Joey Porter Jr. was doing decently solid, I'd say, until unfortunately he got hurt and there was no flag called when he got kind of hit from behind like a blindside block, is what it looked like. But the Steelers team, I was proud of Alex Highsmith for at least getting a sack, and even Marcus Golden got a sack there in the game. But it's tough when you don't have one of the best defensive players in football there, and this team definitely missed him. But I do want to say shout out to Montravius Adams for, I believe he was the one that tipped the field goal by Tyler Bass to keep the Steelers in this game. But when you're down by so much, it's really, really hard to come back in the game. And it's hard to do good when your punter is kind of shanking punts. I mean, Presley Harvin is just, he has some good punts, but I think he's one of the most inconsistent punters in the league. And I know a lot of other Steelers accounts aren't feeling great towards him. How do you guys feel about the Steelers special teams this game?
Yeah, so I think the special teams definitely didn't do you guys any favor, especially with the punting. I feel like that's a common struggle, at least for both the Bengals and Steelers throughout the regular season as well. The punting has been an issue. Like you said, it's already bad enough. You get down early. So now you're not being able to flip the field. If you're just, Bills, as we know, had a lot of momentum, they're essentially just making their jobs easier. I think it's the best way to put it. And when you're down ahead, making the other team's job easier, it just makes it more difficult to come back. And we even saw there the second half, the Steelers did start to show life, but because the Bills were just being gifted, I don't want to say being necessarily gifted opportunities, but they were being in better field position or better opportunities that the Steelers, necessarily the punter, could have controlled. So he certainly did not do himself any favors. I have to think with the regular season struggles and now his playoff performance, you guys would know more about me, but I'd have to imagine the Steelers are interested in looking into a new punter.
Yeah, Jay, how do you feel about Presley Harvin?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because just before this playoff game, they had signed Brad Wing to the practice squad again. So I don't know if they were maybe looking to add some competition throughout the week because the last time they did that, they added competition. Presley Harvin was punting great earlier this season, but yeah, like you said, just inconsistencies. So I think there's probably going to be some competition for sure going into next year.
Yeah, and it's hard too. Presley Harvin, he's had some good punts where he's pinned teams, inside the 5, and he had a long punt of 51 yards, but he was averaging 38 and a half yards punting, and that's just not going to get the job done, unfortunately. But the Steelers had a good season considering the injuries that came and the quarterback struggles and the drama, in the locker room. But I think the Steelers team really rallied behind Mason Rudolph well. And do you guys think the Steelers should re-sign Mason Rudolph, or should they, look into the draft for a quarterback? Braeden, what do you think?
This is always a weird situation, especially this time of year before the combine, before free agency. The Steelers are just kind of in that weird position where they're, unless if something really crazy happens, maybe Caleb Williams smokes weed through a mask or something, odds are an elite quarterback prospect is not going to be there at 20. So they could be in a position where they could be looking at a guy like Kenny Pickett. And obviously, you guys just saw how that went for you. So I definitely think the idea of a long-term quarterback should still be discussed, being actively looked at. But I think seeing how Rudolph conducted himself, how the Steelers team rallied behind him, how they were able to make a playoff push, and while not win the playoff game, they still clearly fought to the end. You could tell they were not giving up. So I think you definitely have to keep Rudolph on this team, at least as little worst case scenario. You're not able to get your guy, at least you have a guy who the locker room likes and you can win games with.
Yeah, and Jay, how do you feel about Mason Rudolph? I know you were rocking his jersey for the game.
Yeah, yeah, I think you definitely want to keep him as a backup. And at this point, I think Trubisky's going to be gone. He's going to be cut as a cap casualty. But it'd be nice if we have Pickett and then Rudolph. And then what I was hearing during the game, what Tony Romo said was he thinks it's going to be a quarterback competition going into next year between Pickett and Rudolph.
And I like that too because obviously, if you're an elite quarterback in the league, like, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen type level players, Lamar, there's probably not going to be that much competition because they know that's your guy. But if you have kind of quarterbacks like Kenny Pickett, who's been struggling but also shown signs of potential, and, Mason Rudolph, who's struggled a lot for the course of the beginning of his career and has now taken off, I think competition brings out the best in players. And having no competition at all kind of makes it to where it's like, well, if I don't play bad, there's no risk. But, obviously there is, you can get fired out of nowhere or cut by a team, but I think just kind of being reminded constantly there is competition is a good thing, but it can also lead to some anxiety, not having a stable, position at the same time, which can cause being afraid to take shots down the field and having interceptions. Ball security is a big part of this league and winning the turnover battle. And Mason Rudolph just looked really calm in that pocket. He threw a pick, which was really crucial in the end zone, which really sucked, but he came back and had 2 passing touchdowns for 229 yards and an 80 quarterback rating. So even if Mason, another team that might want to, if another team offers him a QB1 job, I think he should take it. I think he deserves, at least a chance to start somewhere in this league. Because I think Mason can get it done, even if it's for, another team, unfortunately. But worst case scenario, if he really wants to stay in the Berg and doesn't work out as QB1, I think Mason definitely could be on this roster as a backup because he kind of just brings that presence to the locker room that the Steelers needed. And George Pickens, who's had his character struggles, to start the year and all that, seemed like he really liked Mason Rudolph. So I think it's important to have guys to rally behind like Mason Rudolph. But there was a lot of rumors, after that post-game press conference of Mike Tomlin walking out after being asked about his contract. That's a lot of frustration there, and people were speculating, is Tomlin done, but he still had a year left on his contract. Per, I believe it was NFL I can't remember what it was, NFL Network, I think it was, or something, or NFL Reports or something. He is going to stay for this last season on his contract unless they extend it or renew it or whatever. Do you guys like that decision, or do you think, is Mike Tomlin the problem, or again, is it the staff he has around him and the players he has on the team?
I like the decision to keep him. I mean, because I kind of knew this was going to happen. Well, you're going in as 9.5 point underdogs, and it's like if he doesn't win this game as basically a huge underdog, everyone's going to be looking at him again. But I think that's just where the team's at right now. We need to just maybe look at improving the roster because I think he has brought out the best of the team.
Yeah, I don't think it would make any sense to fire him. Like you said, Steelers weren't necessarily supposed to be here. So, if anything, I think he overaccomplished, and now fans may be kind of harping on that, focusing in on that, and not realizing how well he did for them this year. So, I completely agree with the decision. As a Bengals fan, I absolutely hate it. They should have fired him. But yeah, I don't. But yeah, I agree with the decision. I definitely don't think they should be extending his contract anytime soon. I think let next season play out and go from there. But yeah, I think a lot of other coaches do not make the playoffs if they're the head coach of the Steelers.
Yeah, it's Mike Tomlin's just been that guy. That I know a lot of Steelers fans are saying that the above 500 seasons aren't getting Super Bowl wins, but at the same time, do you want to go 4-13 and have to suffer a season of being bad just to get a chance at a prospect? I don't like that personally. I think I like being able to reload and not rebuild. I know people obviously a team rebuilds, but I like reloading with a small rebuild over time because I always like being able to be excited at any it's the NFL. It's any given Sunday or Monday, or Thursday. So I think reloading and always having a chance at the playoffs is great, and why a lot of people want to play for this organization. And Cam Hayward was saying he wasn't sure if he was going to come back because I think his contract is up or it's close to being up. If Mike Tomlin's not the head coach, but now that Mike's back, hopefully Cam comes back. He deserves to win a Super Bowl. Man, he's one of the best in the league at his position. He used to be underrated. I think the league's now recognized he's one of the best defensive players in the front seven position. But, I think Mike Tomlin people rally behind him and want to play for him, and he's able to take people who have character issues. Like we've seen it before with Antonio Brown, even a little bit of George Pickens, some of these receivers that the Steelers have had some character issues, and just kind of be able to kind of suppress that bad noise they've been making in the locker room and show their talents on the field. So I think Mike Tomlin's a really good guy at building character in the players and developing them. So I think he's definitely somebody the Steelers should keep in their locker room. But considering now that these playoff scenarios, switching topics here, it's the Ravens, it's the Texans at the Ravens. Obviously, as fellow AFC North fans, we wish to see the Ravens lose, but they're pretty good. But at the same time, I feel like the Ravens do have a good defense, and if they're beating the Texans this game, I do think it's because of their defense. Guys, do we have any score predictions here for the Texans at the Baltimore Ravens next week?
I will say Ravens win 31-23 against the Texans. I think Ravens will kind of be up by 2 possessions throughout the game. Texans maybe make a late push, but the Ravens are able to hold on, to close it, win by 1 possession, win by 8 points or something within that. But I think the Ravens will unfortunately kind of control the game.
You got any predictions, Jay, on that game? I mean, obviously you're probably rooting against Baltimore.
Yeah, I'm gonna be rooting against Baltimore, but for now it's hard not to pick them. I'm gonna say 31-27 Baltimore. Pretty high scoring.
Yeah, they're both really good teams, and the Texans, I think definitely D'Amico Ryans, I think that's how you say his name, their head coach. He definitely has to get coach of the year. He's taken a team that was like 3-13-1 to the playoffs in the span of a season, and they beat granted the Browns weren't the best playoff team, but a win is a win, man, in the playoffs, and I think he's definitely got to get coach of the year in this league, or Dan Campbell, of course, because the Lions were bad for a while, but I think I want the Texans to win, but again, I think you guys are right. I think the Ravens are just too stacked. I think the Ravens win this game in a close one, I think it ends 31-28, Baltimore winning with a Justin Tucker game-winning field goal in overtime. I think it's going to be a really good game. But then we look at down here, we have the Buffalo Bills taking on Kansas City, but this time, this version of the playoffs is in Buffalo. Do you guys think the Bills can win this game because they beat the Chiefs before earlier this year?
I'm riding with the Bills this game. If we see the Bills that played the Steelers, if that same team shows up, I think they can beat Kansas City. As we've seen throughout the year, Kansas City is very inconsistent. Their receivers are still not all that reliant. I think they're a very beatable team. I think when they played Miami, Miami was just simply not ready for the situation. They let that weather bother them. Kansas City, they did what they should have. They took advantage of Miami's weaknesses, but they're going into Buffalo, a very hostile crowd, as everybody knows. So I think this is the Bills' moment. I think they finally get that playoff win against Kansas City and their home field. I'm going to say it's 34-27, game-winning drive by Josh Allen, and then the defense gets a stop when the Chiefs are trying to get the game timed to end the game.
That's good. I like that prediction. What about you, Jay? You got any predictions for that game?
I'm gonna say 30-23 Bills. The Bills have just been red hot recently, and yeah, I think Allen having home field this time is going to be a big difference maker. And now they've got James Cook at running back, which is just huge for them because they don't have to rely on Josh Allen now to be their leading rusher in the postseason. It just takes a lot of pressure off of him.
I like those predictions, but I actually myself, I got the Chiefs being able to scrape by with a win, maybe with the help of the refs there. I think it'll be a good game. Obviously, it'd be cool to see the Bills win, but I think the Chiefs escape this one by 4 points. I think they win 33-29 or something like that. I think that's 4 points. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good game nonetheless. And, you know, we look at the NFC here and you got the 49ers and Packers. And I know everyone's obviously going for the 49ers, but you guys think can Jordan Love and Romeo Dobbs and Aaron Jones and that squad get it done? Or do you think the 49ers are just going to win by like four touchdowns?
I want to say they can get it done, but I don't think they will. I think the 49ers are just too talented of a team. They're still my NFC favorite to make the Super Bowl. So I do have them winning. I do think it's going to be a really close game. Jordan Love, he's coming off a $500,000 bonus beating the Cowboys, so he's going to be really motivated to try and earn an additional $500,000. I think it's going to be played down to the wire, but I think in San Francisco on their home turf with that talented roster, I just think they're going to be able to pull by, but I think it will be a fun game.
How about you, Jay?
Yeah, it's hard not to pick the 49ers, so I have to pick them. But, I mean, the Packers' defense, they've gotten a little exposed at times this year, so I think that's going to be the biggest thing for them is they've got to contain the 49ers on defense.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the Packers can win this game. I don't think it's as crazy as people are think, but I think the 49ers win by 2 scores. I'm rooting for the Packers. I'm not a 49ers fan by any means, but I think the 49ers just get it done. I think they win the game on defense because they have a really, really good defense. I know obviously they're stacked on offense, but having Chase Young, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, they just have all this elite talent and they just have a well-rounded team. I think the only team that maybe is even close to their level talent-wise got to be the Baltimore Ravens being a complete team. But I got the 49ers winning this one by 2 touchdowns. I don't know the score. I just think it'll be 2 touchdowns here. And then I think one of the more fun games is going to be the Lions and Bucks. I think that actually might be the closest game because both teams seem like they're the closest in talent as in terms of the rest of the playoff games. Guys, got any predictions there? You think Dan Campbell and the Lions keep it going, or you think Baker and the Bucks show up and upset them at Ford Field?
I'm going to have to go Detroit here. I think the home field is what really, I think, makes the difference maker here. Obviously, Detroit, they've been waiting multiple decades for what they got to experience Sunday. So really happy for them, but you already know that's not enough for them. They're going to be full stadium sellout. They're pumped. Dan Campbell, he knows how to just not motivate the team, but keep the team motivated. That's how they're able to get to this point from where he started. I think while in similar talent, I do think Detroit kind of out I think they have the edge in that regard. So between home field and between just the light talent factor, I think the Lions do pull it out by one possession, either by, I'll say by 4 points, 28-24.
2024. And how about you, Jay? You think can the Bucks pull off the upset, or do you think Detroit gets it done in Detroit?
I'm going with the Lions. I think it's going to be a little more than that. I'm going to say Lions by at least by 10. I mean, they look like a really good team, I think. And, Dan Campbell, he wanted to build the team around like biting kneecaps off, and they've gotten guys that fit that mentality. They just look like a really good team. So I'm going with the Lions.
Yeah, I think the Lions win this game, and I think most of America, even though the Lions are favored, I think most people want to see the Lions win, even if they are favorites, because they've been through so much, man. I mean, it was cool. That best wild card game, I think, by far was that Lions Rams game. It was really good. Obviously, my favorite was the Steelers Bills because I'm a Steelers fan, but I think the best overall has got to be Lions Rams, just because it was cool seeing Stafford go out there. Obviously, it's a playoff game, so he's going to get booed by the crowd, but at the same time, that was kind of I don't know. I would have not booed him then when he was running on the field, maybe when the game started, but I think that was a really good game, and I think Detroit gets it done. I think they barely get it done, though. We've seen Detroit struggle. I mean, obviously the Cowboys game was the worst officiating we might have seen all year, but they've had times where they looked like a really kind of fringe playoff team, but they've had times where they look like they can go to the NFC Championship and contend with the 49ers, because the 49ers obviously are favorites. But I got the Lions winning here by 7. I think they can win by a touchdown. I got it 35-28. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. The Bucks do have a good defense, but I think the Lions will be able to get it done because Sam Laporta is really good, and Amon-Ra St. Brown definitely could get it done. But nonetheless, it'll be really fun to watch the playoffs. But, our teams are all in the offseason now. Looking at the draft here, Braeden, your Bengals are picking at 18, I believe is what it says here, according to this website I'm looking at. And the Steelers, Jay, are picking at 20. Guys, are you ready for some mock drafts, or is it still too early?
The hour after the Bengals lost to the Chiefs, I was all in on mock drafts the moment they were eliminated.
How about you, Jay? You been looking at some prospects that the Steelers can have a realistic shot of getting, or you think what are you thinking?
Yeah, just started by looking at centers because I think that's definitely going to be a position that we need.
Yeah, I think, this NFL draft's going to be really interesting. I was really surprised seeing J.J. McCarthy declare. I thought he would stay another year at Michigan. I mean, he's a really good guy. It was awesome seeing him win. Obviously, I'm a Bama guy, but it was unfortunate seeing that game. But the Washington game, I mean, Michigan just looked really good this year, and there's a lot of good quarterback prospects in this draft. Do you guys think is Caleb Williams? I mean, obviously, I know a lot of places and sources, CBS, ESPN, Sports Center, probably all those other things, are saying Caleb Williams, maybe not the number 1 pick, but the number 1 quarterback taken. Do you guys think there's any other quarterback who could be taken before him, or do you think Caleb Williams has just got to be that guy who's taken first as a quarterback?
I think there's going to be a lot of smoke screens, some reports saying that Drake May could be, but I don't think any of that will be realistic. I think Caleb Williams is the guy. I think that's what the data says. You have to go for him. If you're a team like the Bears, who obviously have the number 1 pick thanks to Carolina, you've had a few years with Justin Fields. He's a good quarterback, but he's not going to be a guy to move the needle. If you have a chance to draft a generational quarterback, of course they don't always live to that, but if in your scouting you're thinking this guy is legitimate and he can be a franchise quarterback, you have to draft that quarterback. So I think because of the athletic upside from he has been criticized a lot throughout the season. There's been a reason why so many reports from scouts saying like this dude's legit. So I do think he is going to be the number 1 pick. Who that team is, we honestly don't know, but I think he's just going to be too good to pass up. Whether it's the Bears or another team, there's going to be some team thinking there's like so many tools. Let's win a Super Bowl with this guy.
Yeah, and Jay, do you see anybody, maybe Marvin Harrison Jr., but any quarterback being taken over Caleb Williams?
No, I don't. I think he's the clear-cut number 1. The only overall player that I would say is close is Marvin Harrison Jr., but obviously just quarterback's just a much more valuable position And I think I agree with what Braden was saying. I think he's got to be the number one overall pick. And I think the Bears should take him, even though what I hear from most Bears fans is that they want Harrison Jr. But the quarterback position is just so important now. Like, you can just look at the Houston Texans right now, like where they are because of CJ Stroud, So just, I think you have to take the chance on the upside.
And if oh, go ahead, Braden.
I was going to say, especially if you don't have to trade up, that's where so many teams in their trade, Carolina, for example, they're in a dumpster fire. Like
Yeah.
trade, getting a quarterback number one overall is always going to be a risk. But if you don't have to trade up to do that, I think that's another factor that should nudge you in the way of, yeah, let's take this guy.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is not every NFL draft has good quarterbacks, and I think this draft is going to be loaded with some stars. Caleb Williams, Drake May. I know Michael Penix Jr. didn't have the greatest last game in Washington, and JJ McCarthy as well. But I think this draft just has guys, even if they're not maybe superstars to start off. I think these are guys who are definitely serviceable and can make some impact. But this kind of raises the question again, going back to what you guys are saying about the Bears. If the Bears, we heard the chants Justin Fields, we want Justin Fields, they want to keep him. If the Bears do get rid of Justin Fields, do the Steelers pick him up realistically, or do you think they just do that competition between Kenny Pickett and maybe Mason Rudolph? Because I think the interesting part is, if the Steelers let Mason Rudolph walk, do they draft somebody, or are they just sticking with Mitch? Is it just going to be Mitch and Kenny Pickett again? What do you guys think realistically here is going to be the Steelers quarterback room for this 2024 season?
My gut says Mason Rudolph's going to be in that quarterback room. I could certainly see a scenario where Fields is on the Steelers, but I think a team's going to end up trading for Fields, maybe offering a little more draft capital, maybe early second round pick, and that's where they'll go. Maybe the Steelers just won't get that opportunity to do so, because I could just see them being comfortable with re-signing Rudolph and going to the season with him, especially with Fields just showing so many inconsistencies. And he really does tend to struggle with those quick throws, first read throws, and sometimes has a habit into standing to the pocket. And that could not end well with the Steelers' offensive line situation. Obviously, something actively looking to fix. But Fields being the Steelers' main target just may not be best for what's them right now.
What do you think, Jay? You want to stick with Mason, or do you want to see Fields get in that room, or both?
Yeah, to get Fields, you have to give up some draft capital, and it's like, would he be better than Pickett or Mason? I'm like, maybe he might be, but I don't think it's worth giving up the draft capital. And like I was saying before, like you look at the Texans, they hit on their guy CJ Stroud, and it's like, I think you want to get that guy in the draft and just go for the upside, all or nothing.
Yeah, and I think too, it's probably cheaper too. I don't know how much Justin Fields is going to be asking for after his contract. I think his rookie contract is still in effect, or it's close to expiring. But quarterbacks are expensive, man. Even backup quarterbacks now, because we've seen like the stocks of backup quarterbacks are going to rise now. Granted, Joe Flacco had an insanity run that unfortunately came to an end. And Jake Browning too had a really good run with the Bengals. Obviously with Joe Burrow out, and even Mason too. Like these guys have just shown up and like showed, hey, when your quarterback's probably going to get hurt. He plays 17 games, and there's a lot of stars where like, these edge rushers that are just so fast now that can make big plays and, sometimes result in injuries. So I think, backup quarterback stocks are going to go really up high this year. So I think it'd make most sense for the Steelers to keep Mason, even if they do have to take some hit in the cap, getting rid of Mitch, and obviously Kenny Pickett, it makes sense to keep. There's no sense in getting rid of him unless some insane trade offer comes through for a trade for draft picks or something. But, I think realistically for the Steelers, I'm looking here at prospects, and there's no like center that's even in like the top part of the draft. But obviously, you don't want to reach for a position, but at the same time, Jay, do you want to see the Steelers reach for, I think his name is Van Pran Jr. from, I want to say Georgia, I believe is where he's from, is like the top center prospect, but he's not even projected to go first round. I don't believe.
Yeah, I wouldn't say to reach. You do want the best overall talent, and I think the Steelers and Omar Khan did a good job with that in last year's draft. They got great talent: Broderick Jones, Joey Porter Jr., Nick Herbig, and if they just continue to do that, I think this team will be headed in the right direction if they just continue to draft well.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is a lot of people are forgetting it's kind of like the Calvin Austin situation. Corey Trice is still on this team. He was a rookie drafted out of Purdue. I think he was the 7th round pick, if I'm not mistaken. He was like a later round pick for the Steelers, and he's still part of this team. Like he was obviously out the whole year, which sucked, but it'd be cool to see another corner come back that can help this team. Obviously, Joey Porter Jr., one of the best rookie corners of this draft class or the former draft class, and which was awesome to see. But I think, even looking at it from talent standpoint, the Steelers are picking around 20, and the guy that's projected to go at 20 right now is an Ohio State wide receiver who I think's staying at the school or something, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see where the Steelers, who they pick at that position, because there's some holes they need to fix. Definitely a center is one, and maybe another tackle or something, because Chucks and Dan Moore are kind of inconsistent. I am high on Roderick Jones. I think even if he struggles, he's still young and can still develop quite well. And I think James Daniels and Isaac Samalu have done a fine job. I think it's just got to be a tackle or a center. But Braeden, your Bengals, they have the 18th pick. Who are you looking at for the Bengals to draft? Like, what position do you guys need to fill the most?
Anybody on the trenches, offense or defense. The Bengals, they're losing Jonah Williams to free agency, the right tackle. Now they just have nobody there. Their left guard position, Cordell Volson, has been struggling quite a bit. He's certainly replaceable. Trey Hendrickson, he has one more year left on his deal. The Bengals drafted Miles Murphy last year, but also Joseph Osai, their 3rd-round pick from a few years ago, hasn't developed. And the Bengals defensive line, once DJ Reader went down, they were not able to stop the run to save their life. So there is, whether it's on the offense or defense, they need bodies in those trenches. I think ideally you can get an offensive line, or ideally actually you can sign an offensive lineman, somebody established. My kind of thought process for the draft is you sign team needs in free agency and you draft players in the draft, not necessarily team needs, but obviously you do want to try and cover that in the draft. But I would just like them to find somebody on the line, add depth, not necessarily a tackle or a guard or an end versus tackle, just somebody who can add depth, can contribute to the team, because they need another tackle. They need interior defensive lineman and exterior defensive line. So best player position in the trenches is where my heart is at currently.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's kind of forgotten sometimes. Is a lot of people want, like, they see Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, there's the guys you can't pass up on. But as you get later in the draft, people are like, let's pick a quarterback right now. And obviously, quarterbacks are valuable. But if you can't win in the trenches, it doesn't matter who you have out there at quarterback. Like, obviously, unless you have an elite guy who's already proven himself, I think the trenches are so, like, the most important part of this game. Like, obviously, offensive line is a position that people, you see them get more hate than love because they don't really get recognized. It's always the running back did this, but you got to look at the blocks that are getting thrown. And, offensive line definitely underrated, and defensive tackles too, being able to stop the run. Like in the game, the Bills-Steelers game, when Cam Hayward was off the field, the Bills were just running it down the Steelers' throat because they had no guy that could really come in there, a big body that could stop the run consistently. So having somebody else in the trenches that's just reliable for Cincinnati would be huge. And, trenches just win the game, and it's a tough thing. And looking at the salary cap, it says the Steelers here are not looking great. I think we're like in the 20s compared to the rest of the league. And Cincinnati, I'm trying to look for them here. They're I think around the same boat, if I'm not mistaken. But it'll be interesting to see, where people get signed. And I'm excited for this offseason, guys. But at the same time, I'm kind of sad because I can't wait till August. I'm ready now. I got like 7 months, so it's tough.
Yeah, off-season boring. Let's just skip the rest of the playoffs, Super Bowl, get it the next season. If the Bengals can't have the Super Bowl, nobody can.
I'll tell you about the Steelers, but honestly, if the Lions make a run, regardless who wins the AFC, I want to see the Lions win it all. I think they definitely deserve it the most, and Texans as well. I mean, obviously they had J.J. Watt, who was insane, but other than that, they've also struggled. So, and I'm kind of sick of seeing Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes everywhere. So, it would be cool to see what happens. But I guess to end off this video, who do you guys realistically see winning it all? Not maybe, and then maybe we can do who you want to win it all and who realistically you think is going to win the whole shebang. We'll start with you, Jay.
Right now, it's hard not to say the 49ers because I feel like there's just not a lot of competition left in the NFC besides, like, I think maybe the Lions can compete with them, but their path to the Super Bowl right now is looking pretty clear. Like the Texans, I think they could upset the Ravens. I hope they do, but right now, I got to pick the 49ers, I think.
And how about you, Braeden? Who do you want to win it all, and who do you think's gonna win it all?
I would love to see the Texans love it. Ohio State fan, just be off see Ohio State quarterback win the Super Bowl. That because I've been as a draft fan, I've also heard year after year after year. Well, they're an Ohio State quarterback, so
Yeah,
I'd love for that to be put away once for all. But I have to agree with Jay. I think this is the 49ers year. I think they have the easiest path. They have the most talent, and that will lead them to the Super Bowl.
yeah. I think the NFC just as a whole this year, there was almost no competition for the 49ers. I mean, maybe the Eagles like a long time ago, and then they kind of fell off. And then, I mean, the Lions are great or pretty great compared to the previous years they've had, but they just haven't. I don't think they. I think they stand some kind of a chance, but I don't. I think it's just. I think the 49ers can win by like 2 or 3 scores if they play up to their standard. I think obviously the 49ers are going to win the NFC, but I think the only other team that can maybe stop them realistically is the Ravens because I know the Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. They're anything can happen, but I think the Ravens defense is the only defense left that can maybe put up a fight against these 49ers. But realistically, I think 49ers will win it all, but I'd love to see the Lions win it all because I'm not a fan of the Ravens. I mean, the Texans as well would be cool to see win it, but regardless, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Well, guys, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. It was great having you. And we'll do some more off-season talks and some more off-season podcasts. But, well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. It's Brennan with the Steel News here alongside Jay with Steelers Loyalty and Braeden with Bengals_NFL. Everybody enjoy the divisional round playoffs. I'll be making some posts about it as well. And stay tuned for some more Steel News content.